Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how you, as a player, can make sure you get your time in the spotlight. So, what do I mean by that? Well, you may have noticed that when you play RPGs that certain people and certain characters tend to get more time in the spotlight and more attention from GMs than others. Why is this? Well, a good GM will try to make sure that players have a more or less even amount of time in the spotlight. However, GMs are only human and they will naturally turn to certain players more. And these tend to be the players who are more invested in the game, the players with characters that are relevant or involved in the plot, and most of all those players that they know when they get some plot are really going to run with it and invest in it. Although a good GM will attempt to give everyone a slice of the action, certain behaviours will likely see the GM shy away from lavishing as much attention on particular players. And these tend to be players not investing in the game or constantly engaging in OOC activity, disruptive players, players who create characters that cause problems or undue conflict within the group. And now, a certain amount of conflict is fine, and an element of healthy competition can be really great for plot and for role-playing games. However, conflicts that cause severe disruptions to the game or that derail the plot and the continuation of the game are certainly not to be encouraged. So, what can you do to make sure that your character gets their time in the spotlight? Well, there's a few things you can bear in mind when you're creating or running a character to make sure that you encourage the GM to give you your amount of time in the spotlight. You can create a character who has links to an established part of the setting. And now when a GM first starts running a campaign, they're normally very enthusiastic about it, and it certainly wouldn't take much prompting from an interested player to get them to discuss the vague details and outlines of the setting. So speak to your GM and ask them what sort of setting they're running, maybe ask them a few questions, engage them a little bit more, pull out a few more details, and if any of these details seem like they might fit somewhere in your character background, ask the GM whether you can incorporate them. At worst, they'll say no and you're no worse off. At best, they'll say yes, and the GM will remember that you were engaged with the background, and in future they may use those elements of your player character's background to bring you further in or to send out pieces of the plot to you, which ensures more of your character getting involved in the game. Give your character a background that's fairly bristling with plot elements that the GM can incorporate into the game and use to draw your PC in. We've all seen people who play characters who have no family, they have no ties to the world, they're a lone wanderer with nothing other than their weapon and their armour and possibly a horse as they travel the savannas or the decaying cities of the world, depending on the genre, dealing out death and destruction to all in their path. Now, this might be absolutely fine for an action movie, but it's not particularly inspiring for a role-playing game. It doesn't really give the GM anything they can sink their teeth into, any sort of plot hooks they can use to pull you in. And there's a number of reasons people might go for those sort of characters. Some people don't like giving the GM ammunition that they can throw at their characters. They think that, oh, well, if I have some NPCs in my background, surely the GM is going to kidnap or kill them to use them against me. And I don't think that's the sort of thought processes to be encouraged. You shouldn't be thinking that, oh, I don't want to create anything because the GM might be using them against me. You should be thinking, I want to put as much stuff in there that the GM can use to bring my character into the game. After all, if a character doesn't face any challenges, any dangers, any threats, then where is the roleplay potential, really? What part of the game will you actually be engaging in? Someone who creates this sort of lone wolf or sort of vendetta assassin style character tends to be the sort of person who's just looking to rack up a kill count. Now, not necessarily all the time, but certainly in my experience, that sort of character tends to lead to a very hack and slash, low roleplay sort of character, since there's not really much depth to hook the role play on when it comes to a character who is essentially a two-dimensional cardboard cutout with a weapon. However, someone who creates a character that has a lot of ties to the world, a lot of plot potential, can be more easily drawn into plots, and the GM is more likely to throw plot their way because they know they're already engaged in the setting, they're already interested. And if you're interested in a setting that the GM has put a lot of time and effort into creating, they're more likely to want to give you further plot. Another thing you can do is you can offer to take some of the responsibility for creating minor elements of the background and the setting off the shoulders of the GM. For example, let's say you mentioned that you were once an initiate of a minor temple in your background. You could ask the GM if they'd like your help designing that minor temple. Now, you're not saying that you're going to design the entire religion, although if your GM's okay with that, great stuff. What you are doing, however, is you're offering the GM, who is no doubt very overworked from doing all their real life stuff as well as designing the campaign world and running the game, you're offering to just lift a little bit of that burden for designing some of the minor stuff off their shoulders. And most GMs will be very appreciative of that and will also think that it shows you're willing to commit to the game and you're investing in it, since you want to take part in designing this world. Now, when you do this, make sure you ask the GM's permission first and that you submit any designed elements for their approval rather than just assuming that they will be accepted. After all, whilst a pushed GM will appreciate help and assistance, they're likely not going to enjoy a player trying to completely usurp their role as GM quite so much. Role-playing is a group activity. The more everyone gets involved in scenes collectively, the more time everyone has in the spotlight. Think about it. If you have 3 scenes in a game session involving all 3 of your party members, then effectively your character has been in 3 scenes in that game. Great. If, however, each of those 3 scenes involves only one of the player characters, then in actuality you've only been in 1 scene during that game. Now, that's a simplified example, but you see what I'm saying. The more the group is involved as a whole, then individually, actually, the more scenes your character will be in. You should try and maximise this by creating characters who are capable of working within a group. And this can be helped by having a chat with the other players during character gen, maybe even creating a few connections between your characters, even if there are only slight links between them or maybe a couple of common threads in the background. And there are some games which actively encourage this during the character gen process. And I've certainly found it very helpful for creating a group rather than just trying to mash together a series of random characters. Not to say that that can't work, it can. However, there's nothing wrong with giving yourself a bit of a head start by creating those links beforehand. If you do find yourself in a scene that involves initially only your character, try and find ways that you can get other player characters involved within the remit of how you play your character. This will not only be appreciated by the other players, who will no doubt reciprocate when it comes to their own scenes, but also the GM, because they won't have to jump between small groups, disrupting the pace of the game. There can still be conflict and antagonism, but discuss it with the other players to make sure that the conflict will drive the plot forward and create more opportunity for drama, rather than derail the plot or the game. For example, 2 space cadets who have a friendly rivalry and constantly try to outdo each other is far better, in my opinion, than 2 player characters who hate each other and attempt to kill each other on sight, dragging the game down with them, unless you're deliberately running a confrontational PvP style of game, of course. Well, there we go. There's some tips on how you as a player can make sure that you get your time in the spotlight. I'd love to hear what you think on the matter, and I hope that if you've enjoyed this video, you'll click on like and subscribe down below. Please leave any comments you may have in the boxes down at the bottom of this page, or hit me up in the Google Plus links. Until I see you again, I look forward to reading what you've written. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. Take care.